Shalom, shalom. I am Moray Amir Writer, Moray of Torah Culture Assembly, and today I have a simple yet profound concept that I want to discuss, all right? You ready? That concept is simply, no son is greater than his father. Now, I'm going to come at this a few different ways and a few different angles, and hopefully through one of these angles, you will be able to hear and understand this clearly observable fact that seems to be overlooked and diminished within the quote-unquote black community, or what we really are, the Hebrew community. All right. So over the years, as I've grown in my knowledge and understanding, and even the way that I read and study, I've become a huge proponent of understanding scripture through the lens of natural law and through examples that nature gives us. So there's this one phrase that I like to use with those who are close to me, and it's that we have to deal in reality, or we have to deal with reality. So, for example, if I need to understand how the body of Mashiach functions, then I need to understand how a physical body functions. All right, so let me elaborate. So in the body, there's a system called homeostasis. Now, I'm going to pull up this definition, and this definition is from the National Library of Medicine, and it is written by George E. Billman. In this definition, it states, homeostasis, as currently defined, is a self-regulating process by which biological systems maintain stability while adjusting to changing external conditions. This concept explains how an organism can maintain more or less constant internal conditions that allow it to adapt and to survive in the face of changing and often hostile external environment. So if we examine what has happened to the Israelite, right, the sons of Jacob, what we have experienced these ever-changing external conditions. In fact, going back to the definition, these changing conditions have been hostile towards us. So we've been scattered, sent into captivity. We've experienced Cold War, Black Codes, Jim Crow, redlining, the deliberate introduction of the welfare systems, the dividing of the home, cracking guns being deliberately funneled into Hebrew communities by the government, police brutality, prisons for profit, school to prison pipeline, toxicity in our music and entertainment, what else? Abortions, the promotion of homosexuality, emasculation, and feminism, just to name a few. We've been surrounded by a hostile environment. But let me get back to the definition. It says, our awareness of homeostasis has slowly emerged over the centuries and has become the central organizing tenet of physiology. If one does not understand this self-regulating process, then it is not possible to comprehend fully the function of the body in health and in disease. The disruption of the homeostatic mechanism is what leads to disease. And effective therapy must be directed towards re-establishing these homeostatic conditions, working with rather than against nature. Now let me see if I can break this down for you. So in homeostasis, the body has managed to attain balance within its systems which allow for proper body function. All right. It is the body's way of maintaining a constant internal environment despite changes in the external conditions. So with that said, some of us need to get back to baseline, and that will only occur if we recalibrate. All right, so a recalibration is needed because we have lost proper function, and we don't respond the way the Creator originally designed us to operate. So with this idea of homeostasis in the front of our mind, we have to understand that we have had our internal disrupted by things that pull at us and control us externally. See, the West, speaking of geographical location, you talk about America or Eurocentric ideas, The West has caused us to take on a view of our fathers that opposes the original design, so a recalibration will cause us to regain proper function so that as a body, we can operate as intended. I remember at one point I had a tablet, and on this tablet, it was brand new. I pulled out the box, turned it on, and it had to go through this calibration period. So it was a calibration because it was the first one. And so right here, I will press one corner and it registered, and it says tap here, and I'll press that corner and then it register. And it had me do that for the corners, then had me do that for the center, and the calibration was accepted. That's pretty much the baseline. So this is the way that it's supposed to function. Now, over time, something can go wrong, something can get off, and it's once it gets off track or something just for some reason is corrupted in there, you have to recalibrate. You may touch in one spot on the tablet, but the mouse or the keystroke ends up in a different area. So you have to go through this recalibration so that the tablet can operate the way that the designer, the creator, intended that tablet to operate. So in homeostasis, a negative feedback mechanism is an important type of control that turns on and responds when conditions change from the ideal or balanced state for the sole purpose of returning the conditions back to its ideal or balanced point. So what that simply means in layman's terms is that if your body temperature rises, then what happens? You sweat. So the body recognizes that a change has occurred. This change is not ideal, right? So there was an influx of heat. So now the feedback mechanism has turned on, which causes the body to sweat. That is the most simplistic way I can explain this concept. I hope that makes sense. But the sweat has an intended purpose, and the purpose of the sweat is for cooling the body down so it can get back to an ideal condition. So you stop sweating when the temperature returns back to what is considered ideal for the body. Now, what is my purpose in all of this? Good question. I'm glad you asked. The ideal state for a Hebrew son is in a state of submission to his father. If one comes along and attempts to sway the son to rebel or attempts to pull the son away from his father by means of stirring up judgment against his father or convincing him that he doesn't need his father, that would be a change in the ideal condition of the mind of a Hebrew, which would be identified by this self-regulating process called homeostasis, and a negative feedback mechanism should turn on and quench the small flame of pride that attempted to ignite this fire of rebellion against the one from which he came. That is in a fully functional vessel, operating in a way that the Father intended. However, our men growing up in these hostile environments have been given vain awards and accomplishments that have caused us to look at our fathers and say to ourselves, I am better than my father, or I'm going to be better than my father because I have thus and so, or because I can do thus or so, or because I've done thus and so. Nothing inside this type of man alarms him to that vanity. Nothing tells him that is vanity and signals to him that that's not our culture, or nothing awakens him to the honest truth that it's not possible to be greater than your father. When no alarms go off, then the negative feedback mechanism has failed, and as a result, the body will not take corrective action. And the changing condition therefore operates as if it's normal. And to do otherwise, i.e. revere his father, would then be out of place. I hope you're starting to see the parallel that I'm making with this natural biological function of the human body, and how a natural functioning Hebrew man is supposed to operate. So when something is infecting it and changing its condition, something should turn on, something should click and allow that body or that person realize that something is out of place and I need to bring it back to baseline. I need to get this condition back to normal, right? So the notion that a man can be greater than his father is not accurate. I get it. Your house is bigger, your car is better, your job pays more, you probably got a degree, 2 or 3 non-profitable LLCs. That's great. Those are personal gains and accomplishments, and in the context of how a father and a son should relate to one another, that's all irrelevant and it's all vanity. Now, within this community, surprisingly, I would understand if it was just ADOS, the descendants of slaves, the so-called black man in America. If he had that idea, that mantra, because it's put at us all the time, right? That's where we learned this, right? We learn this idea from that environment that the black man grows up in. So I do understand it. That doesn't mean it's right, but I do understand it. But for some reason within this community of awakened Hebrews, this idea is still persistent. I've seen it in some of these organizations, some of these assemblies. This idea is still persistent. Now, this should not be so for someone who not only identifies as Hebrew, but also identifies as a keeper of Torah. There is a difference. We have many people now, especially within the last couple of years, who identify as the chosen people, but are still in other religious circles, are still in Christianity, are still just doing their own thing, living their own way. That's completely separate from someone who subscribed to keep Torah. So who I'm referring to in this specific example are those who are identified or self-identifying as the people of the book and are keepers of Torah. It surprises me that this notion still exists. That we are greater than our father because he is still in the world, or he is still in Christianity, and that you're the one in the truth. So that makes you greater. Not quite. It doesn't work that way. I should not be going against conventional wisdom here. Yet, here I am. This should be obvious. But there is clearly a disconnect, and there's clearly a difference between conventional wisdom and biblical wisdom, but it is imperative that we fix this. Let's get into the scriptures. Ecclesiasticus 7, verses 27 through 28. Honor thy father with thy whole heart, and forget not the sorrows of thy mother. Remember that thou wast begotten of them. How canst thou recompense them for the things which they have done for thee? Let's deal with this. It says here, how can you recompense them for the things that they have done? Well, what is it saying that they have done? They have brought you into being. They have begotten you. You have come from them. This is going to be important as we move forward. Keep this in mind. Here is another one. This one here is in Proverbs chapter 23, verse 22. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. See, I've mentioned this before, that you cannot circumvent your father to get to Jacob. Removing him from the equation simply removes you from the heritage that you now boldly claim. So imagine David saying, I'm greater than Jacob. David became king, successful warrior, gained renown, had many wives, was declared a man after Yah's own heart. Yet imagine him saying that I'm greater than Jacob because I have all of this and I had this. Let's bring it closer. Imagine Jacob saying he was greater than Abraham. Jacob had 4 wives, 12 sons, accumulated great possessions, and yet still prayed by invoking the name of his father and grandfather. Genesis 32:9. And Jacob said, O Elohim of my father Abraham and Elohim of my father Isaac, O Yahuwah, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. He is praying in the name of his father and grandfather. He's invoking them. So despite what he has accomplished and what he has, he never loses sight of who's his greater. But somehow we have, because we're in the truth. And now because we're in the truth, now we have this tendency to look down on those who are not. To badger them, to beat them over their head. We don't have patience anymore. It's all about flexing how much we know, how many books we've read, how much scripture we have memorized. Right? So we stick our chests out. We got this bravado. Your doctrine don't align with my doctrine. And so you're wicked and I'm righteous. The main thing is no longer the main thing, and because now you're in the truth, you feel like you can look down on even your father and mother and disregard the commandments of the Creator, the one who woke you up to this truth. You feel as though you can disregard those who he put over you because of what you know. As my emo would say, this is just a bunch of intellectual masturbation. That's it. We're just getting off on all this information we have. We have to understand that this separation that we have from our fathers is not our natural condition. It is not the Hebrew way. You are your father's offspring. The offspring cannot be greater than that which it sprang from. Let me say it again. You are your father's offspring. The offspring cannot be greater than that which it sprang from. Your father, who may not be in his walk, has fulfilled his purpose, believe it or not. That purpose was to be fruitful and multiply, and to maintain existence, to make sure that he didn't cause the bloodline to be cut off from the face of the earth. And he did that. How do we know? He produced you. And the Father allowed you to come to yourself and wake up in the land of your captivity, and now you are a light. But you're not shining as bright as you could because you have this sort of short circuit or a loose connection. You're sort of flickering right now. See, a son who embraces this idea that he is greater than his father will do this because he has had to become before his time. Something has caused him to feel like he had to sit in the seat of his father while his father was still alive. So it's as if to say that while his father is still alive, that I can do a better job. So he attempts to supplant his father and sit in the seat before it's vacated. And when a man moves like this, it reminds me of Adoniah, son of David, how he attempted to make himself king while David was still alive. David was he was older, he was in a vulnerable position, but he was still alive, and he attempted, Adoniah attempted to usurp the throne from the living king and the heir, who was Solomon. And this, unfortunately, is the spirit that a lot of Hebrew men are operating in. And while it may not be a kingdom that they will rule over if they sit in that seat, what they are attempting to do is send their father's name, reputation, and mantle into exile while saying, look at me, I'm the captain now. So let's get back to that light analogy real quick. So you're a light bulb plugged into a socket, but right now you're turned off. Now, because you're in the socket and everything is wired, you have the potential to illuminate your area at any moment. Why? Because you are connected to a wire that ties to a light switch. Break that connection, and it's as if you don't exist. You might as well not have a bulb installed. But the Father in heaven wakes you up, and now you're shining bright. Why are you able to do this? Because the light switch. Your light switch being your father, the light switch isn't getting the glory when everyone can see and the room is well lit. No one is tripping over anything. See, when those around you are stumbling less and less, all right, hear me, you're a light, and those around you are stumbling less and less, glory to Yah. But the light switch has done its job and provided the pathway for the light to shine. It has provided the pathway for the light to exist. And at any point, if you were to sever that wire from the light switch to the light, then the light ceased to be. Therefore, you should not overlook the significance of the light switch, even though the light switch may be off in the distance, maybe off in the corner somewhere. The light switch may be wired into an outlet and so on and so forth, but if you trace all the wires in the house back, you get to the electrical panel, where all the switches and the outlets and the wire run to. And an electrical panel, that's Jacob. Again, you remove your connection to your father, and you don't make it back to Jacob. So there's a scripture that says, and I don't remember exactly where it is, I just know it's in Ecclesiasticus, but it says that a man will be known by his sons. So keep this in mind, that the greater you become, it's still a credit to your father's account. Your greatness in all that it encompasses is also a credit to him. So understand this. You have 5 sons. Guess what he has? He has 6. You and your 5. Your sons are his as well. So let me circle back around to this malfunctioning feedback mechanism. So earlier when I was talking about it, I was saying that, because I want to highlight this because I'm going to explain how it can be corrected. But a negative feedback mechanism is supposed to turn on when an external condition changes the body's ideal condition. So to be a malfunctioning one, that means something from the outside has changed the condition, and the body did not respond appropriately. So it did not recognize that this change has occurred, that something is wrong, that something is out of place, that the ideal state has been changed. So how can we correct something like this? Let's go ahead and go there. Now, I love my father. I am Amir, son of Brady, son of Ael, son of Austin, and in my father I find no fault in him. He is perfect in my sight. But understand that just like the Ethiopian said to Philip in the book of Acts, how can I understand unless someone teaches me? Likewise, how can a man do unless he has been shown? So let me give you a scripture. Acts 8:27 through 31. And he rose and went. And there was an Ethiopian, a eunuch, a court official of Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who was in charge of all her treasure. He had come to Jerusalem to worship and was returning seated in his chariot, and he was reading the prophet Isaiah. And the Spirit said to Philip, "Go over and join this chariot." So Philip ran to him and heard him reading Isaiah the prophet and asked, "Do you understand what you are reading?" And he said, "How can I, unless someone guides me?" And he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. The Ethiopian here was a great man, yet he was self-aware and was honest with himself that his greatness in one area doesn't automatically transfer to greatness and understanding in another area. So he invited Philip to sit with him, and Philip expounded and taught him. This man was great, but yet he did not think so much of himself that he could not be taught something by someone. All right? So me personally, I needed a point of reference. My father also isn't in this walk. So what I was saying earlier, I was saying from a point of understanding because I've seen how people respond to their parents. Yet my father isn't in this walk. But I did not respond to him that way. That's why I can speak what I was saying, because being in that same situation, I responded differently. All right, but back to my point. My father is not in this walk, so he took me as far as he could in his area of knowledge and with his examples. But I needed to know how to walk this patriarchal Hebrew life. And that's when I was drawn to a man, and I yielded to one who is greater than me, who is a patriarch, a man that I aspire to be as, because he has done what I desire to do. Therefore, I became a son to my elder. This does not turn me against my father, whom I love and find no fault in, yet I was transplanted. all right, taken from the soil in one environment and transplanted into the soil of another one that is more conducive to me bearing fruit as a Hebrew man. But that doesn't diminish my original soil. I grew up there. My roots developed there. But in order to maximize my growth and my capacity to bear fruit, a transplant was needed. And because every good and perfect gift comes from above, Yah blessed me and drew me to this man. The Ethiopian, he needed something, and he knew he lacked in the area. And so the father sent someone, and the Ethiopian was drawn to him and allowed himself to be taught by him. And so now, me being drawn to this man, my feedback mechanism was restored. Why do I say that? Because it wasn't until this transplant occurred that I actually gained the understanding that I have now. And through him, I was taught how to value and appreciate my biological father. Prior to that transplant, the same notions that men would hear today would not have turned on my feedback mechanism. It would not have caused the alarms in my head to go off. Even though I loved my father and I had a good relationship with my father, it's still, even for me, there were still aspects that I was accepting that, okay, I may not do this with my father, but hey, it's okay if you view yourself in that capacity, or if you feel that you're better than your father. It was still this idea that I had accepted, even though my relationship with my father didn't reflect what I had accepted. I saw no issue with that idea. But now that my feedback mechanism is restored, because I went under the tutelage of a man who had a great relationship with his father. He honored his father, and because he obtained, he obtained that which I had not, he was in a position to show me how to achieve it. How can a man do unless he is shown? And this is what happened with the disciples. Yahusha took them, said, leave your family, your biological family, and follow me. And he taught them, trained them, and they saw how he moved, and they saw his works. Remember, how can one do unless someone shows them? Yahusha showed them the blueprint. He gave them the playbook. He gave them the template by his word and his works. So he takes the 12, Matthew 10, and he takes them, instructs them just like a father would. Like a teacher. Like a father. See, these roles are one and the same. How can a so-called man learn to be a man unless he sees and identifies with a man? And when I say identify with a man, it is this kindred spirit. It's this drawing to him that a man recognizes a man, identifies himself with that man, in that man, and is drawn to that man. If Peter was not drawn to Yahusha, do you think he would have followed him? You think he would have been cutting off ears if he was not drawn to Yahusha? There was this connection to identify who Yahusha was. Understand this. Yahusha tells them in Matthew 10, 24 through 25, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher and the servant like his master. Some translations will say as his teacher and as his master. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. He is bringing them to baseline. The idea of not being greater than, but to be as. All right. Therefore, a student should work to be as the teacher. One accord, same mind, same mission, same vision, no duality. All right. Oneness. So a son cannot be greater than his father, but should strive to be as his father. So likewise with a student, in the teacher role, right? So the student should be as the teacher, son as the father. Ironically, in a healthy family dynamic, these roles are actually interchangeable, meaning that a son is also a student, learning from his father, who is his teacher. Let me say that again. if there is a healthy body, a healthy family dynamic, then these roles are interchangeable, meaning that a son is in the seat of a student who is learning from his father, who would be his teacher. Now, I talked about this scripture in the previous lesson, but I want to bring it up again because it perfectly encapsulates the point that I'm driving home right now. Ecclesiasticus 30, verse 4. Though his father die, yet he as though he were not dead. For he left one behind him that is like himself. So this is what happened when Yahusha died. It was as though he was not dead because he left many, or at the time initially, he left 11 who were like himself. And they continued on promoting the word and doing the works. All right. Understand that he was not their father, but he functioned in a father role or capacity to them. He functioned as a father would. A greater and lesser dynamic. So I'm a reflection of my father, my original soul, and the one that I have been transplanted in. My roots reflect my original soul, and my fruit is a reflection of where I've been transplanted. I needed both, the former and the latter, to become the Hebrew man that I am now. I needed both. Because the conditions that I was in, I didn't have a proper mechanism to show me what was wrong. But now I do. So to function as your teacher, as your elder, as your father creates a state of equilibrium. Right? It signifies as a properly functioning vessel who is in a state of homeostasis. But now try to function as greater than your teacher, your elder, your father. This would knock you out of this state of harmony or balance. And this is not the way that a Hebrew man should move. We should not move in such a manner. This is clearly due to pride, ego, and definitely improper judgment from a lower vantage point. It is a telltale sign of immaturity. It's a telltale sign of immaturity in a so-called man to be driven to be better than his father. Now, this man can have all the physical attributes. This man can have the intelligence, right? His IQ could be high. His EQ could be high. He can have all of these things. He could be creative. He could be purposeful. He can amount to great things. But it should not be a driving force in his soul that I'm going to show that I can do this better than my father. I'm going to show that my old man ain't got nothing on me. Now, the caveat to this is that a man's father can say that his son is greater than him because he sits in that seat. He can attribute a higher state of greatness to you. He can do so, but it is not proper for the son to say in his heart that he's greater. The mere thought of this throws the whole system out of whack. You strive to be as him, and you're doing well, but striving to succeed or accomplish more than him is vanity. You may actually do it. He would acknowledge it. It shouldn't be your driving motivational factors. You very well may accomplish more on this earth, but you need to humble yourself and understand that even your father who is not in this walk, or the one you don't know, you couldn't accomplish anything without him because he brought you into being. You wouldn't exist. Torah or Torah kept his bloodline alive. He maintained existence, and because of that, Abraham was born. And the Father revealed himself to Abraham, just like you who may have this fractured relationship with your Father. The Father in heaven has revealed itself, revealed to you who you are. But this is only possible because your Father has maintained existence of that bloodline. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that a lot of these lessons that I've been doing lately, they're a little hard for some who have had this fractured relationship with their Father. But trust me, we have to keep the main thing the main thing. And this is the main thing. This is why it's so prevalent within the text. We have to keep the main thing the main thing. A lot of this other stuff that we deal with, it's vanity, right? This may not be conspiratorial, so it's not going to bring you the excitement. But I promise you it's going to bring some changes in your life if you were to take heed to what I'm saying. Reconciliation should be on the table, but as I mentioned in my last lesson, the micro lesson 1, that is your role to seek out your Father. It's not his role to seek you out. It is your role to seek him out as the lesser. But this is what we should be doing. This is how we should be moving at this point of time. We don't have much time left. And we're missing this foundational aspect of the Hebrew walk. I encourage you, if you can reconcile with your Father, reconcile with him. If you can't reconcile with your Father by the way of him not being here on this earth anymore, or by way of not having an open line of communication with him, like no way of contacting him, then it is at this point that you need to humble your soul and realize that you need to be transplanted, that you need to pray to the Father in heaven and ask him to draw you to a Hebrew man who would be able to show you the areas in your life and in your understanding that you lack. You may be great right now, just like the Ethiopian was a great man. But just like the Ethiopian who realized that he was deficient in the area, you have to do the same. But hey, you may look at yourself and say you don't need none of that. And if you do, then more power to you. If that's how you feel, then you just go on with the way your life is. But I can tell you firsthand that walking a patriarchal Hebrew life is very difficult to actually do if you do not have a patriarchal Hebrew man who can lead you and show you how to do it. It's not just you being on an island reading the Bible and thinking you got it all figured out, or you being on YouTube 5-6 hours a day listening to lessons and now you think you got it all figured out. You may have acquired some information, but you haven't seen the practicality from a walk of a man who is an actual legitimate patriarch who has been in the way and has fruit to show for it. But that takes humbling. It takes humbling your soul to go to your Father and tell him that you're sorry for judging him, that you love him. It takes a humbling of your soul to understand that he was doing the best he could with the information that he had. With his circumstances and environment that he was placed in, he did the best that he knew how. That takes a humbling soul to understand that. I mean, the flip side is that you can always hold a grudge because he wasn't there, or he didn't do what you thought he should do, and he didn't move how you think you would have moved. But I promise you, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's not. So let's correct our error. This is not the time to be in agreement with error. It's time to correct it. That's pretty much all I got for this lesson. I hope you are taking heed to what it is that I'm saying. It's important. I can't stress that enough. That it is important. It's important. All right, but until next time, I am Moray Amir Ryder. Peace and shalom.